Now, I normally have these movie conversations with y'all in my car, but it's honest to God too hot outside, so we're gonna talk about Harold and the Purple Crayon in my bedroom. Directed by Carlos Saldana, stars Zachary Levi, Zoe Deschanel, Lil Ray Howery, and a whole bunch of other people. This story is based on the book Harold and the Purple Crayon by Crockett Johnson. It's a children's book. It's adorable about a little boy who has a magic purple crayon and he can make everything. He has two friends, Porcupine and Moose. So our Harold in this movie is grown, played by Zachary Levi, and he's living his best life in his little animated world with his purple crayon and his two friends, Moose and Porcupine, and the narrator. As he's asking the narrator questions, and it's quite adorable actually, he tries to get a sense of who the narrator is and why he exists, why things happen. And the narrator's like, well, I'm an old man now. I guess you could say I'm like your old man. And he gets that kind of stuck in his head, like that's his old man. So one day they wake up and the narrator isn't narrating anymore and they're trying to figure out why. So they decide to go to the real world because that's where the old man lives and find Harold's old man. The shenanigan, that happens when you have a magical purple crayon that can make anything. He ends up meeting a little boy named Mel who lives with his mom. His dad died some years ago, and he has an imaginary, crazy beast friend named Carl. And then we have Gary the librarian, who I guess is supposed to be our antagonist here, who is trying to become the next big fantasy author and also has a crush on Mel's mom, Terry, played by Zoe Deschanel. I saw one critic say that this movie is best suited for kids, ages 7 to 12, so right about middle childhood. I would agree with that. I actually ended up moving seats in the theater because, and this is always the risk with going to children's films, even when it's earlier in the day, is you get little kids, and little kids make noise, they talk. It is not a big deal, but there was this little girl, she had been maybe 5 or 6 years old, who talked the entire time, was just asking her dad questions, some of the same questions over and over and over again. She was just not really following the story, wasn't quite really understanding what was happening. And yeah, I think 7 to 12 is good for this. Not to say that your youngin won't enjoy it. I mean, it's goofy enough. It's not as goofy as it could be, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But, this movie has a very important lesson. I don't think your younger child is going to get it. But again, it's your child. You know your child. The movie is not completely terrible, but it's not as good as it could be. For such a creative and imaginative concept, this movie does not go far enough. It's not creative enough. It falls flat on its face. It's weird when you have a movie that it's clear that so much potential was just left on the editing room floor, or they just didn't even attempt at all. It's almost like they were scared to really just kind of take it and push it further. They were afraid of what people might think, or it might be too goofy or whatever. But definitely there was this emptiness that I felt like this movie just did not go as far as it could. Like there was so much left for this film to do, even in the short runtime. It's only an hour and a half. It was just empty. Is your 7 to 12-year-old going to care about that? No. But it's a film like any other film, and I'm going to treat it like any other movie. Reviewing children's movies is a little difficult because there is a certain amount of silliness and over the topness that you have to take into account depending on who the target audience is. And also because people get so sensitive when you review children's movies. I'll get at least 3 comments that'll say, it's a kid's movie, why are you taking it so seriously? Because they take it seriously. You don't drop tens of millions of dollars on a movie and then put it in theaters hoping it makes money and you don't take it seriously. If they take it seriously, I'm gonna take it seriously. It's art like anything else, which means it's subject to criticism. And if I had to sum it up, this movie is largely forgettable. No one's going to remember this movie next month. We still have a couple of months left of the year, so only time will tell, but as of right now, Inside Out 2 is the children's movie of the year. Even with all of that, this movie has a very sweet message that I think it communicates effectively. It's all about the power of creativity and the power of imagination and not being afraid to dream big or think outside the box in spite of what people might think of you. Even if people who are close to you don't believe in you or don't believe you, like, don't be afraid to just use your imagination. Stuff that we've been hearing, millennials, since we were little kids. I mean, Barney taught us that at a very young age, right? There's also a little kind of underlying message here about the importance of fathers. There was bits and pieces of this that reminded me a little bit of Frankenstein because at the heart of it, this is about a man who is searching for the one who created him. Now, I will say this, if you are in children's ministry, I would watch this. I feel like you could get some interesting teaching material out of this. You can use this. Don't be afraid, children's ministry people, to use modern secular art to drive a point home. Don't be afraid. I mean, look at Inside Out too. But on a very real note, I think this is the worst I've ever seen Zooey Deschanel. She is such a quality comedic actress. She's a different kind of comedic actress, and this did not allow her. There was room and space for her to be goofy and fun, even though her character is a bit more serious. But it's almost like she was contained a little bit, like they had to kind of reel her in. On the flip side of that, Zachary Levi was made for children's entertainment. Made for it. Like, he is perfect for this. Even though the story, I felt like, again, was a little restrained, a little limited, they didn't go as far as they could have gone. He went as far as he could go, and then he went beyond that. He takes stuff like this very seriously, and he has so much fun with it. Is it worth a ticket? I mean, maybe. School is about to start. You're probably looking for some last minute thing to do with your family before you send the urchins back on the school bus. Here you go. Especially considering what's out right now. I mean, you have a thriller out right now, you have Deadpool and Wolverine, and then you have Twisters, which is, I think you could take your children to, but these two more recent movies, I think, that are taking up a lot of space in theaters, this is pretty much it in terms of what your littles can see and enjoy. I mean, you still have Inside Out 2, Despicable Me 4, but you have a lot of big things coming out in the next couple of weeks that are just going to take up a lot of that space. So also, I feel like I need to mention this in terms of what's appropriate for children and what's not. Number one, there's no agenda pushing here, so I know that's a big concern for a lot of parents. However, there is a joke in here. It's like one joke that is, I would call it inappropriate, but that's the intention of it. It's supposed to be inappropriate. That's what the scene calls for, is an inappropriate joke, and the response within the scene is as you would expect it to be. But I think the joke itself might bother some parents, so that's another reason why I say be careful bringing your small ones. I think your 7 to 12-year-old will find it funny, and it'll just like, but you, mom and dad, you might be bothered by it. So yeah, it's flat. It's very flat. You know, for a movie that's all about pure imagination, it lacks depth. But Zachary Levi alone, I feel like he just makes it worth it. Also, Lil Ray Howery. Them together, they should do more stuff together. They're funny together.